and Derek had been pacing for hours in his room. He found his mom downstairs on the couch watching TV, but they quickly turned it off when he entered the room and they saw Derek's face. Derek looked at them and said, "Mom, Dad, I don't know what to say. I've been pacing for hours trying to write something down, but I don't know what to say." Derek's dad looked at him and said, "Son, just be mindful of your audience and be concerned for them in your heart." His mom said, "Honey, just remember, kiss. Keep it simple, silly." Now, none of that actually helped. You see, the next day, Derek was supposed to give his valedictorian speech at his high school graduation. A situation that's both terrifying and exciting all at the same time. And in a normal situation, it would have been perfectly understandable for Derek to listen to his mom and dad, but this was not a typical graduation service. 2 weeks prior to graduation week, 2 of Derek's classmates were driving home from a party and were involved in a head-on collision with a vehicle that had run a red light. Neither boy wore their seatbelt, and they were ejected from their vehicles. They died upon impact in the pavement. Derek sunk down into his chair, and with tears in his eyes, he said, "What am I supposed to say? What can I possibly say that's going to make any difference?" It doesn't have to be a life or death situation. It can be any opportunity to give a word of encouragement or guidance or instruction. It could be a high school breakup. It could be a doctor's bad news. It could be a child's first steps of independence away from mom and dad. It could be a son or daughter flying away with their new spouse on their honeymoon. Or it can be a bad week that started off bad and just got progressively awful as the day and week continued. When we see someone in misery, there's this inclination, this voice in our heads that says, "I should say something." Yet what can we do? What can we say that could make any difference in the life of someone else? Have you ever thought that? Have you ever had that moment? Paul certainly did. He could have based what he was going to say off of everything that he ever said to anyone else. He could base what he was going to say off of the things that occurred in his past. But that's not the words that needed to matter the most. Paul tells us exactly what words are the most important no matter what situation God presents us to speak to the lives of somebody else. And he tells us in 1 Corinthians 2 in our lesson for this morning. Friends, go ahead and open your bulletin and let's look at that together. It says, "As for me, brothers, when I came to you, I did not come with superior speech or wisdom in order to proclaim to you the testimony of God. For I had no intention of knowing anything among you, except Jesus Christ and Him crucified. I came to you in weakness and fear and with much trembling. My message and my preaching were not marked by persuasive words of human wisdom, but by a demonstration of the Spirit and of power, so that your faith would not rest on human wisdom, but on God's power." This is the Word of God. When we think of Paul, we may think, what an amazing guy that God chose to witness to other people, right? I mean, this was a guy who had a checkered past, who believed the wrong stuff for a long period of time. He was a guy who was not a simpleton, but a guy who was well educated, who was in a group of Jews in Jerusalem that was a high priestly order that was wise, law following according to what they believed. He was a guy that had the best teachers, who had a great status as a Roman citizen, who had a good, dependable profession, a tent maker. He was also a guy that had one mission trip under his belt that he looked at and could view as completely successful. This was a guy who was now going to Macedonia, Greece, to start his second trip. And his first stop was in Philippi. And for all intents and purposes, we can say it was a great success. Yeah, he was in prison for a while, but even so, that experience, he wasn't tortured, but he used it to share Jesus with people, a variety of different people. We could say, yes, that was successful. And then from there, he went down to Thessalonica. He met some more resistance there, but still, he brought people to know Jesus, and then he came to Berea. And those people there, those people were studious people. They looked at what he said, and they matched it with what they had heard from the Old Testament to verify that what he was speaking to them was the truth. Yes! People want to listen to God's word. Finally, right? And then he continues on with his journey. And he goes down to Athens. And upon his arrival there, he's horrified by the idolatry that's taking place all around the city. And like his custom, he steps into the Jewish synagogue and he shares Jesus with them. But there was no immediate success, and so he continues his preaching out into the streets, where he's heard by students of philosophies from all walks of life, and specifically those that were Stoics and Epicureans, people who looked at what life is all about, in a sense, what every philosophy is all about. Life. And they gave him a grand invitation to come to the Areopagus, a place where people gathered together to talk while others listened. From every school of thought and study who had any kernel of wisdom, they shared it there. It was not only an invitation to listen, but an invitation to speak. It was quite a big deal. When we think of public speaking, most of us probably think, that doesn't seem like that big of a deal other than to be terrified as I stand up in front of my high school class to give a report, or to talk, or to do a training session with my subordinates at work. It's not really exciting. It's not a job anyone would want to have. Do you know in 2019, Forbes magazine said that the 3 top professions that were sought after in the United States were electrical, medical, and technological engineers? That instead of jobs where people built and established and strengthened connections with people to better their lives socially, they resided in cubicles, factories, and offices to improve on some type of technology or product, or to fashion a new one. Do you know what one of the top jobs of Paul's day was? An orator. Orators were trained public speakers, people whose sole profession was to talk, because communication is important. They donated time and energy and money to that craft to speak. They were sought after so much that the highfalutin, hoity-toity people of their day and age sought them out so that when they spoke, they wouldn't sound like idiots. The ones that were sought after the most were the well-spoken, wise ones that were able to weave a tapestry of words that bewildered the simple and inspired the naive. These were the people that Paul stood among in the Areopagus to talk to. And do you remember what happened? He He had the opportunity to share with them the knowledge of the true God and the salvation that could be theirs. But when he got to the resurrection of the dead, they laughed at him. No wonder Paul says, I came to you in weakness, in fear, and with much trembling. I'm sure he certainly felt so. I'm sure what happened in Athens rocked him as he approached Corinth. Because as he entered that city and saw all manners of immorality, he probably thought, just like Derek, what can I possibly say to these people that's going to make any difference? I mean, if the high-level thinking individuals of Athens couldn't be persuaded by carefully crafted arguments or pervasive speech, how can these people in Corinth who are consumed by the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes fare any differently? Derek stood at the podium and at the microphone with his palms sweaty, with cotton mouth in the corner of his face. He breathed deeply. He looked down at the podium. He thought of what his mom and dad said, and he pushed those thoughts away. He scanned the audience to see his fellow classmates and their families, and he spoke. This is supposed to be the greatest day of our lives. Yet what happened to our friends has revealed that it's not. That it's just one more day, like any other day. That it's just one stone in the road that we walk and the life that we live. For our friends, their road ended. And their tragic loss has revealed something to all of us. That life is short. That tomorrow isn't promised. That how you are remembered today, if today ends, is what matters the most. It reveals that who you are and what you believe and how you live constructs the essence of your identity. And this day is just one day in a process that defines you. Who do you want to be? How do you want to be remembered? What would you want people to know about you? Because this day is another day in your process to find out just exactly who you are and who you're going to be. It was quite the speech. There was more to it, of course. And though it was well written and constructed and heartfelt, it wasn't one that people would remember. What people would remember the most at that graduation service for their entire lives is that two people from their class died tragically because of a stupid mistake. On their part for not wearing their seatbelt, and on the part of the person who ran the red light to strike them dead. Friends, like Paul, we've been given the eyes to see that people have needs. That light that Paul saw on the road, which opened the eyes of his heart to see Jesus, is the same light that has shined on our hearts as well. It's a light that warms us in the coldness of trouble and disaster. It's a light that shines bright to show us how to move and walk and live in a world that is completely consumed by the darkness of selfish pride and tainted desires. It's a light that shines all hope, all confidence, all comfort, all strength, and all trust on one place and one person. And Paul tells us exactly who that is. Jesus Christ. And Him crucified. That alone Paul's life, he decided to have no other thought in his mind, no other feeling in his heart, no other words on his lips than the one who appeared to him on that road all those years ago and revealed his light to him and set him apart to be light and salt. He knew that all human effort to encourage and give comfort and direction failed. But Jesus and his salvation never would. Like Derek, we struggle to say anything, to do anything in the situations that God presents before us. Where Paul said, I resolve to know nothing except Jesus Christ and him crucified, is that the same thing that's on our hearts and minds? Not just for an hour a week, but every hour of every day, of every week, of every month, of every year. Does that define our essence? Do our lives mimic that? Do our words reflect that? It's difficult seeing people go through horrific things in this world. Things that are the result of poor choices or deteriorating lives because of circumstances. And there's that inclination, that thought, I should say something. But it's so easier to say nothing. It's so simpler to be silent. And not because none of us have experienced hardships, none of us can sympathize or empathize with them. All of us who have gone through various trials and tribulations in this life. But also, all of us at the same time have probably encountered some type of person who tried to talk to us and encourage us and failed. And we don't want to be like them. We don't want to say the wrong thing. And so it's easier just to say nothing. And then there's the other side. In those moments of torment and difficulties in people's lives, the doorway is opened, and that voice says, I should say something. And we do. And it's wrong. It's wrong because we imitate Derek with his sweaty palms, with his racing heart, with his shortness of breath, with his darting gaze, trying to figure out what to say, while completely ignoring the advice to just simply keep it simple, silly. Instead of giving a clear, concise message of hope and comfort, stuttering noises come out with obvious and overused terminology. Or our valedictorian speech of flowery and fluffy words that are meant to beautify the situation that's happening, but doesn't comfort and is never remembered. Like Paul, do we resolve to know nothing but Jesus Christ and him crucified, or do we resolve to know everything else but him? As lights of the world, do we point to him, or do we point to ourselves? Or point people to themselves? Or worse yet, leave them wallowing away in darkness and silence? Friends, in our effort to remember KISS, keep it simple, silly, is there anything more simple than Jesus Christ and him crucified? True comfort is found in the easiest of places. It's in Jesus. Jesus, the one who became one of us. Jesus, the one who knows our struggles because he endured the same. Jesus, who sees our pain because he feels it. Jesus who knows of our longing and our sadness. Jesus who sees our needs and is willing to give everything that he is to meet them. Not the needs that are contaminated by sin and Satan, but what we truly need. He lived for us so that we could live for him. He died for us so that death would not be the end of our road. He rose for us so that the message we share for others and to others is certain and true and the simplest, easiest thing to say. Paul said it with this. He said, "My message and my preaching were not marked by persuasive words of human wisdom, but by a demonstration of the Spirit and power." Friends, no doubt God is going to present problems for you in your life, in the lives of others, that you have the opportunity to say something, do something. Their problem is not yours. Neither is the solution, because you are not the creator of either. What is yours is the opportunity to stand on the accomplishments of Christ and tell them about his salvation. Give them his strength. Point them to his light. Derek's speech, as well-intended as it may have been, was utterly useless. It only served one thing, to give one kernel of truth. Who you are and what you believe defines the essence of your identity. You and I are heralds of hope. We are speakers of salvation. We are people who hold to nothing else than our faith in Jesus, the one who comes to save. Our faith is in Christ, the anointed one of God, who gives us all hope and all comfort and all life. Our trust is in nothing else than that cross on that mountain on that day that serves as the only source of comfort through all ages. And the comfort we have is that as we talk to people, as we talk to ourselves when we're going through those difficult times, our hope is not in our efforts, but in the Spirit who works through that beautiful message of peace. Because faith comes from hearing the message about Jesus. And how can they hear unless it is spoken? That's what's simple. That's what's easy. Friends, you may ask the questions, what can I say? What can I possibly say that's going to make any difference in the world? Just say Jesus. What can I possibly do that's ever going to help? Point them to his crucifixion. What it means for you. How it was offered for the world. And how those blessings are theirs. Can there be anything simpler or easy? Amen. And the peace of God that transcends all understanding guards our hearts and our minds through Christ Jesus our Lord. Amen. Friends, please rise.